Fossil fuels remain what they have always been, the key to civilization. That is true now. That has been true since Homo erectus started the first cooking fire in a cave nearly 1 million years ago. So-called green energy is not close, is nowhere near replacing gas and oil and coal. Here's a graphic we saw today that illustrates the point. These are the relative sizes of the players in the global economy. The numbers are from the IMF. As you can see, the world is completely dominated by the economic power of China and the United States. As of today, our two economies are roughly equal in size, though thanks to COVID, China is quickly pulling ahead. That is a problem. In fact, that is the biggest problem in the world by far. 2016 was the year that you and everybody else became a racist. It was the worst slur they could think of. They used it every day of the 2016 campaign. Racist, racist, racist. Well, in the end, and they hated this above all, Donald Trump won more non-white votes than any Republican presidential candidate ever, but they didn't stop. No, they just increased the volume. And by 2020, a lot of Americans were just exhausted. Fine, we'll vote for a mannequin if only you will calm down. That was the unspoken yet very clear deal that liberals made with the country. Of all the economic crises a country can face, inflation is the most dangerous. Inflation doesn't just make people poor, it totally destroys their confidence in their leaders, the authorities who issued the now worthless currency they're using for toilet paper. Inflation is not an act of God like a drought or hurricane, it's an act of negligence like drunk driving. It is proof that the people in charge are reckless and stupid. That's why inflation tends to topple governments. Once you get inflation, there's no pretending you've done a good job. You have not done a good job, and everybody knows it. A woman is a human being with 2 X chromosomes. Ask any geneticist. It's detectable in a blood test. But if you're still confused by what a woman is, you can ask a doctor. Women have wider pelvises and different bone structures from men, not to mention very different genitalia. It's usually pretty obvious they're women just by looking at them. Women are built differently because their bodies are designed to do different things. Nature is real. Women menstruate, women give birth and then breastfeed. Men do not do these things because they can't. Not a single man in all human history has ever had his period or delivered. Here were her first words from the podium.
I am obviously acutely aware that my presence at this podium represents a few firsts. I am a Black, gay, immigrant woman, the first of all 3 of those to hold this position.
So that was a little confusing. It wasn't actually about America, it was about her. But still, we learned that Karine Jean-Pierre is a Black lesbian, the first ever in history, she reminded us, to hold this particular job. No matter what they tell you, homelessness is not an act of God. It's not the result of economic collapse in this country. America did not run out of housing. Instead, a determined group of well-funded ideologues decided to make it easier to live on the streets in this country while doing drugs. Therefore, many more people now live on the streets while doing drugs. If you hand out tents and needles to addicts, what do you think's going to happen? You're going to get more addicts living in tents. Again, it's not complicated. This is not a vexing public policy question that requires the Brookings Institution to investigate. It's not like fixing Social Security. And the solution is as simple as the problem. Here's the solution. Stop putting up with it. Say no. No, you can't smoke meth in the park. You're not allowed to crap on the sidewalk. In the state's new Safety Act. Watch this.
As of January 1st, 2023, the following things will go into effect, and people need to be aware of this. It abolishes cash bail for almost every offense. This includes, but isn't limited to, kidnapping, armed robbery, second-degree murder, drug-induced homicide, aggravated DUI, threatening a public official, and aggravated fleeing and eluding. And keep this in mind, businesses and homeowners. Officers will no longer be able to remove trespassers from your residence or your businesses.
About 107,000 of your fellow Americans, most of them young people who should have had long, productive lives, are instead dead. They have died from drug ODs over the past year. This is the saddest thing that has happened in our country in a very long time. And yet Congress, which claims to run the country, can't be bothered even to acknowledge it, much less do anything about it. Instead, your representatives in Washington just voted to send yet another $40 billion to the Ukrainian oligarchs who paid off the president's son. That's what happened. And it's just the latest check that Congress has cut them. You can add it to the approximately $14 billion they've already spent on Ukraine. That brings the total as of tonight to more than $54 billion. How much is that? Well, for perspective, it is more than we spent per year on average on the war in Afghanistan. As Congressman Thomas Massie has pointed out, Congress has now spent more money on Ukraine in 6 months than the U.S. government spent on all roads and all bridges in the United States over all of last year. The $40 billion we're sending to Ukraine so they can secure their borders, by the way, is more than double what Joe Biden has asked to fund customs and border security in the United States. One bill, more than double what we're spending this year on our borders. And then, in the middle of this historic drug emergency, and it is, the bill spends more than 10 times the entire budget of the DEA. Zelensky is now shaking down our cowardly Congress for more cash at the very moment our own economy and our own borders are collapsing. Watch.
At this time, we have two key financial needs of the country. That's $38 billion to make up for the deficit of our budget for next year, and other $17 billion that were verified by the World Bank and needed to rebuild the critical infrastructure. The scope of this year's support should be not less than $5 billion.
What? Some uppity foreigner in a t-shirt demanding money for his critical economic needs? We have critical economic needs too, buddy. Who are you, troll? Go away. What? Since when does that guy have a claim on our treasury?
That's just Russian propaganda.
So notice Brett Baer asked the question, did the U.S., did the Biden administration, or any of its proxies have anything to do with the sabotage? To which John Kirby says, we didn't do it, and then moves right to the point, which is anyone who says we did it is repeating Russian propaganda. That's what John Kirby said. It's disinformation from Quislings, more loyal to Vladimir Putin than their own country. That's the kind of thing that only truly bad people say. Okay, if the White House says so, obviously we have no choice but to believe it. But you still have to wonder, not everyone does believe that. Why? Vladimir Putin may be evil. They tell us that he is evil. But is he stupid? Probably isn't stupid. And yet, and here's the strange part, if you are Vladimir Putin, you would have to be a suicidal moron to blow up your own energy pipelines. That's the one thing you would never do. Natural gas pipelines are the main source of your power and your wealth, and most critically, your leverage over other countries.
If Russia invades, that means tanks or troops crossing the border of Ukraine. Again, then there will be no longer a Nord Stream 2. We will bring an end to it.
How will you do that exactly? Since the project and control of the project is within Germany's control.
We will. I promise you, we'll be able to do it.
But I also think she has a political future, and conservatives would be very unwise to dismiss her as just a fad. She's more than that. And I think, I think she is going to run for president, and I think at some point she has a pretty good shot of winning. So I wouldn't blow her off as a minor phenomenon. But look, she's very easy to make fun of. But I think the key thing to remember is this works. A. B, she means it. She's sincere in this. She's so wrapped up into her own narrative. She really believes she is a victim. And C, clearly she thinks she's going to be president. She has a sense of her own destiny. And I think it would be a huge mistake to underestimate someone like this. She performed double mastectomies on minors for no medical reason whatsoever. That's insane. It ought to be a crime. In a civilized country, it would be. And they know that, because when they were caught, they tried to erase the evidence. And they're not alone. UCSF, UW Health in Wisconsin, Golisano Children's Hospital in New York, Vanderbilt Health, Children's Minnesota, all of these hospitals have deleted the evidence of their gender-affirming procedures. They're awful. And every person who's participating in this, in their moments of clarity, knows that 10 years from now, there will be thousands of vocal victims of this moment of true craziness and hysteria that has gripped our country. People's lives are being destroyed right before us Most adults are too cowardly to say a word about it, and the Democratic Party is actively doing all it can to promote this, to protect hospitals that are mutilating and destroying the lives of children. Okay, everything about that is dark and horrifying, and there should be an uprising against that. That's aimed at your children, not at adults who can make rational decisions, but children, people too young to drive or drink alcohol or smoke cigarettes or serve in the military or vote. People who are not, we have agreed as a group, capable of making rational adult decisions. And that's aimed at them. It's propaganda aimed at them, and it's a lie. Puberty blockers are safe. They are absolutely not safe. You can't delay puberty without damaging severely the bodies of young children. Population. Now, where did all those people come from? There's nothing wrong with more people. The question is, who are they and where do they come from? Well, what you're seeing is not the kind of organic growth that you would see in a healthy society that's become more prosperous and welcoming of families. It's not like people were so confident in the future they decided to have more kids. No, it's just the opposite. Exactly the opposite of that. In fact, since Ted Kennedy's bill became law, birth rates among native-born Americans, which are the clearest possible measure of optimism in the future, those have dropped off a cliff. And then came Joe Biden. Joe Biden accelerated that sad trend beyond what anyone thought was possible. The foreign-born population is now growing by 132,000 people every month. That's more than triple the average high under previous administrations. It's double Barack Obama's highest totals. According to AEI scholar Mark Perry, we can expect over 9 million new illegal aliens by the end of Joe Biden's first term. So they're doing it way too fast. This is too much change at once for any society, ever, at any point in history. No society can metabolize this many new people and stay stable. Especially not now, in this specific moment. Because two unprecedented waves of human migration, you have to add, let's see, a collapsing economy, inflation, food shortages, skyrocketing housing prices, falling wages, the trauma of 2.5 years of COVID. Not an attack on the people coming here, by the way, some of whom are legitimately great people and want to be here for the right reasons. The problem is the volume. No country can withstand what we're going through right now. And in our specific case, it turns out that a lot of the people coming are not ready to participate in a democracy. A huge percentage of the migrants crossing the border today are functionally illiterate. Immigrants are supposed to make America more diverse, but in practice, they usually head to places that are already pretty diverse. Brooklyn, for example, is only 35% white, pretty diverse. One place they almost never go is to towns where Democratic voters live. Strangely, and you can check this if you want, it's on the internet, the party of diversity is led by people who strongly, overwhelmingly prefer all-white neighborhoods for themselves and their families. Why not diversity for them, too? Why not a Malibu airlift? How about Burlington, Vermont? 86% of the residents there voted for Joe Biden, who believes that illegal immigration is a gift. 77% of political donations from Burlington over the past 4 years went to the Democratic Party. And yet it's still troublingly white. Time to decolonize 84% white Burlington. These towns are crying out for help. Be Martha's Vineyard. It's a natural. Joe Biden took 70% of the vote on that small Massachusetts island. Over the past 4 years, according to FEC data, 92% of all donations from its biggest town, Edgartown, Massachusetts, went to the Democratic Party. So you probably imagine Edgartown is pretty diverse. I mean, the Obamas live on the island, right? No. In fact, we checked, at last count, Edgartown is 95.7% white. What century is this? This is a dangerous trend, and not just because people are dying. Nothing destroys the legitimacy of our institutions more than politicized law enforcement. You can't have that. Justice must be blind. If there is a single institution we have to preserve for the sake of our children and grandchildren, it's our justice system and the law enforcement agencies that serve it. They can't be corrupt. If they're corrupt, it's going to be pretty hard to live here. In 50 years, it's not justice unless it's applied equally to all adult American citizens, period. Anything less than that is by definition not justice. And no less than the Attorney General himself has said that again and again and again. I came to work here, he said, because we're committed to the rule of law and to seeking equal justice under the law. That was Merrick Garland in January. Quote, we conduct every investigation guided by the same norms. Real story is that the Biden family was getting rich from business with our enemies. They were selling access to the U.S. government to China. And that is a crime. It's certainly a moral crime. As recently as 2020, Joe Biden denied that he or his family had made any money from China. Watch this.
Vice President Biden, there have been questions about the work your son has done in China and for a Ukrainian energy company when you were vice president. In retrospect, was anything about those relationships inappropriate or unethical?
Nothing was unethical. My son has not made money in terms of this thing about, what are you talking about, China. I have not had, the only guy made money from China is this guy. He's the only one. Nobody else has made money from China.
Flat out liar. That's a lie. In fact, it's a lie so obvious, even the Washington Post, which has carried water for Biden since the very beginning, had to correct it. According to the Washington Post, quote, over the course of 14 months, the Chinese energy conglomerate, that would be CEFC, and its executives paid $4.8 million to entities controlled by Hunter Biden and his uncle. That would be Jimmy Biden, the former nightclub owner. Are these guys experts on energy? What are they experts on? Nothing. Leveraging the U.S. government for personal profit. That's it.
Tucker Carlson Tonight is one of the most watched pay TV news programs of all time. Today, it draws a nightly audience of around 3.2 million Americans.
Animals have one advantage over us. They don't have opposable thumbs or a sense of the future, but they do have a very close, in fact, that's all they have is their instincts, and their instincts are spot on. If I always tell my kids, if you think somebody's creepy, he is. If you think someone's lying to you, you're right. Don't second guess it. If you perceive danger, it's real.